Yes, good morning to everyone. I think I will go over some of the things which are specific to low power design in CMOS design. I'm not going into more detail about CMOS circuitry as it, but I'll just give you what is CMOS so to understand how do we understand in terms of power and how do we estimate them, how do we analyze them, and how do we fix in our VLSI design. Okay. Then we'll go to the next slide, and this is my agenda. I'll explain you about what is CMOS circuitry to give you a little idea about what is a basic NAND gate implementation in terms of CMOS circuitry. And then I'll talk about what is a dynamic and leakage power computation happens in your CMOS circuitry, and how does that helps out in industry to identify the loopholes and figure out where the problems are and how to fix them. And then how to lower your dynamic power, right? And then we'll talk about low power usage details like different low power cells, how do we use them in our design and how do we validate them in our low power design cycle. And then I think that's will be a part of introduction to the UPF with low power designs, what we are talking about. And I'll give you more detailed about where the UPF constructs can be used in your design, a simple example for that. And then we'll talk about the same approach of how we have used that design, how to validate it in a different stages of circuit, right? There are multiple stages in when we start from architecture to your final chip fabrication. We validate in multiple stages. We'll go through, understand what are the different stages we validate, and we see the problems, what kind of issues we have, understand that. Then I'll talk about the different career opportunity if you go deep more into the low power, right? What kind of career opportunities exist in the present industry, and then about Q&A. Then I'm going to next slide where it is, we'll talk about what is, first we'll talk about CMOS circuit, then we'll go to dynamic power consumption. If you see here, the circuitry here, it is a PMOS circuitry here, and it's an NMOS circuitry here. If we have these two as a circuitry, that will called as a CMOS circuitry. And if you see, this is the source, and this is your drain, and this will be a drain, and this will be a source. And the source of the circuit will be connected to VDD, and this is the gate, which is connecting to an V input pin, and the output of the drain is connected to V out, and the drain is also connected to V out here. And the source is connected to ground here. If you understand, this is a ground indication, and there is some effective capacitance called C load, which is also grounded. So if you understand this circuitry, this is a PMOS circuitry, which is having a bubble indication. That is a difference between your NMOS circuitry and PMOS circuitry. And if you understand this CMOS circuitry, you can, this is a basic NAND operation, so not operation. If you just apply your input as 0 here, you get it as 1. So this is the logic, right? Not operation is you give it as 0 here and I get it as 1. That is a basic implementation of this circuit. And you can implement multiple means all the circuits in your design can be implemented in terms of NAND, NOR, and or different CMOS circuitry. I'm not going into that details, but if you understand this circuitry as a CMOS, then if you understand what we are providing as input or what we are getting output, then we'll go into details about how do we compute our dynamic power. So if you understand the dynamic power clearly, so if you are applying 0 here, that means that this particular transistor is getting into on state. And to get this transistor to on state also, we should apply a voltage which is more than your VT, threshold voltage. So that is a minimum voltage which the transistor gets operated on. After that, it will go into an active mode and it will be switching and doing activity on that. So if you see here, the VDD is getting charged. This circuit is going into on state, and this whole path is getting activated, and the whole current gets flowed from your drain to source and then to the C load. So this is the dynamic power, which is what we are talking now. So if you do an either way, right? If you are now instead of giving a 0, if you give a 1, what will happen is this circuit will go into off state and this circuit will be on state. So you'll be discharging whatever charge it is stored in a capacitor, it will start discharging into this NMOS circuitry. So overall, our power will be like I have told for this particular path as of CL into VD square into switching activity, the probability of 0 to 1 transition. So it is 1, right? One time we have change here, and your voltage is something, if you understand it is a 5 volt, then it will become 5 square. And the capacitance in some femtofarad, you can just compute that. So this is energy per transition. And if you multiply it by the frequency of the circuit operation, you will get the total dynamic power. So total dynamic power will be like for one particular transition here, it is of CV into VD square into F. So for the full path, right? If you see this is the path, we are getting this much power plus you discharge it. So that is also dynamic power. So you do add that of C effective VD square into F, that will all together form your dynamic power. So the total, yeah, if you see that C effective, it is also including your C load plus the capacitance formed when it is doing activity in this transistor as well as this transistor. This both will have internal capacitances which will be forming your C effective. So C effective out is computed is your probability of transition from 0 to 1 and into multiply with your C load, that will from your effective capacitance. So if you see this dynamic power is mainly because of the switching activity, and it is not mainly, it's not a function of your transistor size. So if you see the transistor size can be measured in two ways. One is your width of a transistor and length of the transistor. So those are not coming to picture of playing role in the dynamic power computation. And it is only mainly dependent on your data input. And apart from this and the dynamic power, we have something called internal power, which is called a short circuit power. So if you see here, when we are transitioning from 0 to 1, when we do from 0 to 1, there are some time, right? This is the midpoint time where these two will go into on state. It is a midpoint where, if we can see, these two transistor will come into on, and there will be a short circuit current starting from your VDD to ground. That will result into your internal, it is also called crowbar current, and it will result into your internal power. That is also one of the key factor in your dynamic power consumption. Totally, our dynamic power is coming from activity as well as the switching, as the crowbar current, what is happening. Next, we go to the next slide. We understand more about leakage power. Here, if you see, the leakage power is mainly two things. What we have is VDD and I leakage. And the I leakage is contributed from mainly from four different parameters. One is your sub-threshold leakage current that is flowing in the when you apply a 1 year, right? It is actually grounded. So when you ground it, there is amount of leakage current which flows back from this path, that is result into sub-threshold current. And there is another current called drain junction leakage current happening because of the load capacitance reverse biased. So that current which starts from your V out to the capacitance, that will result into a drain junction leakage current. And there is another component called gate leakage current that mainly computes from your gate path to your drain path. So these three, and there is one more current called reverse bias current. When you have a reverse bias across these two, then there will be a reverse bias current going to drop. That will also result. So totally, this is coming mainly because of four key parameters. One is your drain, another one is sub-threshold, and other one is a gate leakage. Other one is your reverse bias. So overall, if you see, the leakage current reduces, your dynamic static power get reduced. Static is nothing but a leakage, which is another terminology used in general. This is mainly because of this four parameter, and you can reduce this I leakage automatically, your static power will reduce, or if you reduce your VDD, your leakage will reduce, but there are side effects when you reduce your VDD. So sub-threshold current is a dominating factor in most of the design as of now, and these other currents, whatever we talked, are not more dominated part. And sub-threshold, this leakage is also will be increasing exponentially with the temperature. It is very much sustained with temperature. Means whenever your temperature is going to increase, the leakage current also will be increasing exponentially. So wherever it is burning out more power and the temperature is increasing out, so this will be resulting. I think we'll talk about how we can we control this leakage current in later part of our presentation. So if you are now clear, we talked about dynamic power and we talked about what is leakage power. So in general, right? So whenever we are designing a CMOS circuitry in a VLSI design, we look at about these two key factors to check what is the best possibility to design a circuit, right? So whether it is an mobile chip, whether it is an server chip, or whether it is a normal laptop chip, right? So every component needs to be understand very well, so that these two parameters should be measured and proper judgment has to be taken when we design, because addition to the power which is burning out in the chip, we need also a cooling solution for this. That also will be contributing to our power, extra additional power. So these two key parameters will be helping out a better way when we are designing a chip. So that is the reason we are worried about we need to have a low power design, so that we can control both their leakage power and dynamic power in a better way. So let us go into the next slides, where how can we reduce our dynamic power, what we talked the formula, right? So one is you can lower your capacitance. So how do you lower your capacitance? Reduce your wire length, means that from your gate to gate, remove as much as possible your wire length. Whenever you have a critical path, you reduce them as much as possible. Another one possibility is transistor sizing. Whenever your transistor is a lower size, probably your capacitance also get lowered. And how many of this one output, one fan out, how many it can be driving, reduce them as much as possible, so that your effective capacitance comes down. The other parameter which can affect our dynamic power is VDD. So it is almost like two times, right? It is a quadratic effect happens whenever you're reducing your voltage. Automatically your dynamic power decreases. So that is one way which we can achieve by reducing the dynamic power by controlling your VDD. Another one possibility is reduce your frequency. So another thing is, if you see, this is the activity factor, which we don't worry much, because which we cannot control much on this side, but we can do controlling on this side only when we are specific to clocks. So another one is your F. We can reduce frequency, but if you see in general our designs, we want a high running frequency. We want to do our work very immediately, and we don't want to spend less time on the other things, right? So your frequency is in the latest designs is getting increased, and your VDD is little getting lowered because of technology improvements, and they are trying to control your capacitance as much as possible. So in general, if you see what all three parameters, if you start reducing it, automatically dynamic power come down. But there are side effects with respect to that also, because I cannot come down my frequency, because I need to work at higher frequencies in some designs, and some designs we can work at different frequency. We'll talk about and see how can we make a design with a multi-frequency, so that we can achieve the same output from the same design, right? So that is the thing we'll try to understand. And the other key things what we'll understand is how our VDD reduction will play in our design cycle. So if you're reducing VDD, that means that you are planning to use a multiple VDD supplies in your design. So I cannot keep same supply for complete design. So instead of that, I keep multiple supplies which are not critical. I put it on a lower voltage, which are critical, I put it on a higher voltage, right? It has a complexity with respect to timing and other challenges, but we can play around that key parameters when we design our circuit. So this, if you understand, then we'll go to the other things, where what we are doing in terms of power reduction in terms of design space. So if you see, if you have a constant throughput and latency, what we can do? If you want a constant thing, then one thing what we can do is we can reduce your VDD. Another one is you size your circuitry, and another one is use your multiple VDD. so that all the critical things can be on a critical VDD, means higher VDD, and non-criticals can be on lower VDD. Another one is you do a better optimization in the logic design. And to reduce the leakage, what we use is a multiple VTs. So this is mainly dependent on how good your library is, right? Because library should also be supporting and having a multiple VTs, so that if you are if you are using a lower VT, that means that that design is contributing to an higher leakage for that. So we need to avoid that kind of cells. So we'll talk about that multiple VTs also. And then other method of reducing your active power is clock gating. So mainly the most of the power which is burning out in your design would be from a clock. So clock would be unnecessary toggling even though your data doesn't toggle. So in that scenarios, what we can do is we can make a proper enable expression and make it dependent, like if data is toggling, make the clock to toggle. So we are doing that by clock gating. You just have an if condition like enable, and if enable is set to 1, the data is changed, then you clock gate yourself, right? So that is a way you just maintain the reduction of the clock power by using a clock gating. The another one in non-active mode is use multiple VDDs, which we have put up here also to reduce your leakage. So once you reduce your VD, automatically your VT will also come down. That is the advantage you have. So and then you can use a variable VT flavors also, like based on criticality of the timing, right? We can just use what kind of VTs to be used in a design on those critical paths, and non-critical paths you reduce your VT as much as possible. Then another thing where it is variable throughput latency. That means that I want to do some activity now, and after 5 minutes, I don't want to do anything. So before the 5 minutes, I want to do. I'm computing very high computing task, or I'm playing game, right? So that time I need an higher voltage. So how does that happens? Okay, there are some circuits in design in our VLSI design that is called a dynamic voltage scaling and frequency scaling. So whenever we need an higher frequency or higher voltage, we use them it need basis, that is mainly controlled with your DVSS or DFS logic, which is internally sitting into your design, which will be telling you, okay, I am now running this computation and this complex logic, I need an higher frequency for that, then I provide it. Whenever I don't need, I tell back to the circuitry that I don't need it, then automatically it downscales your frequency and downscales your voltage, so that still your output is achieved. So this is the key thing which nowadays is very much effective, because we are using the devices in a it goes into sleep state, or it doesn't get used betterly. That time we can control power, because that helps a lot of power saving in terms of designing also. Then another one in terms of runtime is using a variable VT. Whenever you have different VT flavors, automatically it will be reducing your leakage. This is not the one, at least in industry, which is now getting used, but slowly they are converging on this area also. So if you understand how are we designing, or what is our techniques, what we do in terms of reducing our active power, means the dynamic power as well as the leakage power with this whole thing, then we'll go into next slide, where you'll talk about how do we design whatever we talked now, how do we design them in a different stages. Okay, one is what first step, I'll just go through this and then we'll talk about these steps later. So first step is you put on a paper, tell that, okay, I want to have this particular design and this particular software architecture for this. Once you have this, then what do there are is there are some RTL designers, they take it, they create the circuitry and give it to the backend team for implementation. So before once they implement the circuitry in the design in using a Verilog or system Verilog, then they also check the functionality. How do they check? They run the logical simulations and check, okay, whatever I have implemented, is it behaving like an expected behavior or not? Then after once they check the logical simulation, they go with synthesis. They could do convert whatever you are written in RTL code, a Verilog code, system Verilog code into a gate level format. That is what done in logical synthesis. Once we are converted into gate level format, what they do is they check the timing. So whether we are meeting the timing. This is not anything in terms of functional. Okay, functional things are covered in logical simulation, and non-functional with respect to timing is what is getting covered in your timing analysis. Like, okay, I'm having correct type of cells, which is giving me a right kind of rise time, fall time. Those are what we will be checking in timing analysis. Once we do that, we also check formally that, okay, we are we are good with respect to what we have designed in terms of formal verification, right? Logical simulations can catch few of them, but most of the bugs which corner cases cannot be caused at logical simulation because it is more data driven and this is all expression based. So you can catch more kind of bugs or problems in formal verification. Then we actually go to a physical synthesis where we actually do a placement routing and see if you have any problems there. And after that, you just create a OSS or GDS, then do the final layout and then do the sign off. Okay. In these all steps also where the low power design is playing role is what I have put up here, but it has major other steps internally also. I'm not talking about that, but we'll talk about how these steps in between steps are, where is our low power is coming into picture. You see this, right? So the system and software architecture, we choose what should be our power intent, whether we need to have a multi design or whether need to have a single design with power gated, or we need to have both multi design with power gating feature internal to that, or we want to use a retention into our design, right? So these are the criteria or conditions which will be checked in when we start designing our architecture. Then what we do is we implement that in terms of power intent called UPF format. We'll talk about that details in the next coming slides. But if you just understand it, we are creating some another files which are parallel to your RTL files, which has only power intent information, which is telling that, okay, I need a different kind of power domains I want to work on, and these need to be operated on different voltages, and they need a power switch, or when we have a power domain, we need to have some additional elements also. Those are the things which will be implemented in RTL implementation. Once we have that, we go for simulation and check, okay, whatever we have implemented in terms of power, is it behaving properly? Are we missing out anything? Mainly, we check we are crossing across the domains, and some of the logic internal to that is going to off, and we don't have anything protected. So the protection cells are not there. That is what we'll be checking out here. Then we go do the logic synthesis. In logic synthesis, what actually we do is whether we are able to do understand whatever voltage they are sending from the receiver domain to the sender domain, right? So they are same voltage. If they are not, then automatically logic synthesis tool will try to figure out, okay, we are crossing from a different voltage, but we are not having a proper protector cells which will convert from an high voltage to low voltage so that I can recognize it properly. So those are the things which will be taken care when you do a logic synthesis. Then probably you do check really if we are missing out any kind of these old things in formal verification also. And finally, we use a sign off tools at each and every step also, but I put at a final thing, but we can do it every step. We'll talk about that, I think, in another slide, what kind of different tools are used in industry for doing the sign off for power. So we'll do the sign off at the final end, telling that, okay, I have a design and I have my UPF, and it has gone through different steps in between, and it has written out an UPF file. is that file valid with respect to what system and architecture team is expecting? So this guy is dictating, but we are trying to tell at the final step whatever it is going wrong, incorrectness in these different steps by doing a sign off flow. So these are the different steps where we check or understand, or where the low power team comes into the picture inside design. So let us now understand what is UPF. Okay, then what UPF means, a unified power format. This is an standard which has been designed from almost a decade, two decades back, and this is supported by most of the tools. And the what is the advantage of having UPF is we separate your design files from our UPF files, where we define our power related information. So if you see, the UPF will provide an easy and effective way to describe your power intent in the design. Hence, it will not introduce anything in the RTL. It is completely done in terms of UPF file, but it will also introduce your power reduction techniques in the RTL stage itself. So we can try to understand, are we able to achieve power reduction from the RTL stage itself by using the UPF file. Then UPF language specifies how to create, what actually it specifies is how to create a power supply network in each design element, and the behavior of supply nets with respect to each other, and how logical functionality is extended to support dynamic power switching to the design. So this is mainly the power gating logic. We'll talk about it. So these are the these are the three major stuff which UPF language will specify. It's mainly telling what should be a power network, what should be a nets with respect to power network, and logically what can be done in terms of improving your dynamic power. So let us go and see, understand how our UPF standard evolved. So UPF is a power intent format co-developed by EDA vendors and their users, and it was intended to be open standard to allow interoperability among the vendors so that multi vendors can support it. So if you see the EDA vendors which support UPF standard is these all Atlanta, Magna, Mentor Graphics, so many tools like Synopsys, everyone, right? Then if you see, the version 1 was published by Accelera specification in 2007, and this is donated to IEEE also. Then the IEEE 180 is what the version of 101 format. It is also referred as 20, which was published in 209, and it is widely adopted in industry and power intent format. And there are some few companies which still uses 1.0, and there, what are the major difference between 1.0 and 2.0 are the constructs are clubbed and made very modular in 2.0, and more construct supports are added in 2.0. In 1.0, the main thing is they have created all the basic features, basic things, but I think we need to do a duplicate effort, like writing out same commands for multiple implementations. So that kind of duplicate effort is what will be reduced in 2.0, and most of the companies are converged or moved to 2.0 widely. And these are some of the tech companies which are also contributing to this UPF standard with respect to the EDA vendor also. Then let us understand how we evolve about that, and how are we specifying your UPF. One thing, if you understand, is RTL. What is RTL? It will describe your functional behavior. It'll if any RTL changes are must, you should restart your implementation. That is a key thing. Whenever you do an RTL change, your backend team should, or the implementation team should be modifying their implementation. They cannot do straightforward. But coming to the SDC, what do you mean by SDC? These are the constraints. I think maybe some companies uses different format, but in general, if you see that those are called design constraints. This can be implemented and analyzed, and this can be changing the SDC on fly during the process of implementation. You don't need to do a re-implementation. This can also be generated on the fly for their implementation. This is mainly telling out, okay, what are my drive strength cells, what are my clocks, what should be our frequency of the clocks. Those are the key things which will be there in SDC. Then UPF. The UPF describes the power intent, that is means the power behavior. We create a separate from RTL and must be compiled with RTL because it affects the design behavior. And the UPF need to change, should restart the implementation, not recommended to redefine the power intent on the fly. That means that we should not be doing an on the fly redefining the UPF and using it. We should start from the implementation and redo. That means that whenever you have an UPF change, you start it from RTL and end up to the implementation or up to the sign off. That is the way you have to do.